So good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It's the end of August already. Can you imagine? I know this month has gone by fast. So this month we've used Ernest Holmes' book, that's right here, Living the Science of Mind, to provide us with a clear and direct roadmap for a way of living in peace, fulfillment, happiness, while staying consciously connected to the life force that is our life. And as I've said in previous weeks, these writings don't promise that we will never experience the hills and valleys in our human experiences, but the wisdom offered in this book and in the writings, all of the other writings that Ernest Holmes wrote, which make up our faith and philosophy and the way of life known as the science of mind, it gives us a clear and direct approach gives us a clear and direct way to approach them. So following our significant work of last week, we had quite the Sunday. Today we are going to continue to break free of the bonds of yesterday to live fully today and in all of our tomorrows. Our time together today is inspired by the chapter Living the Science of Mind, entitled Principle and Precedent. And that's on page 215. So through a 4-step process offered by Holmes in this chapter, we will firmly fix our consciousness. And remember our 8 elements of consciousness that we talked about all through this month? I knew you would. Okay, good. Well, we're going to fix in our consciousness that principle which is never bound by precedent, and that we can create new ways of living in peace, fulfillment, and happiness here and now. But before we get to that process, I want to put the finishing touches on our last week's work. So last week, if you were here, you wrote down what you wanted to release so that you were no longer bound by it. Okay? You brought it up here to our sacred Chinese water bowl, and you released it on paper that dissolved in the water. Yeah, just poof. And while you did that, you said, all of the power in the universe conspires to support me in releasing the past and building a beautiful tomorrow today. So that was what we all said. And you all remember that? If you were here, right? Okay. Yeah. And it worked. Did it work?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
So, and we did a really nice prayer of release afterwards. And, that was our Sunday last week. So in the past, usually on the first Sunday in the new year, we have done a similar exercise that we call it the Rising of the Phoenix, where we have flash paper. And whatever you want to release from the old so that you can start the new fresh, you write it down on the flash paper and bring it up to the flaming candle, and it's a very cool experience. So we didn't have flash paper last week, so we had dissolving water, and it worked pretty much the same way. I thought the result was the same. It was a symbolization. It was just one of those things that symbolized the release of what we desire to let go of in our lives, so that we make room, we create the space for something bigger and better to move in. Because, what is it? Life abhors a vacuum. You create that space and something moves in, right? Happens in my garage every time I clean it out. So I have proof. It's amazing. And we got it all cleaned out, and now our kids moved. And so all the stuff that they didn't take with them is there.
But she had a roll. When you moved, you took it.
Yes.
You sold at her next yard sale.
Yeah. Well, that's coming up. So
One summer they all came home.
So, this process is something that we don't have to wait for the new year or whenever else we bring it here to church. We can do this anytime. In our minds, we can imagine waving a wand over that which we wish to release, and we can say the words abracadabra, right? This kind of sounds a little silly, but, like when you were a kid, did you ever go abracadabra? Does anybody know what the word?
It's actually a Hebrew mantra.
Do you know what abracadabra actually means?
As I speak, I create.
All right. Well, it is right. It's derived from an Aramaic phrase meaning I create like the word, and the Hebrew phrase meaning is I will create as spoken. Mm-hmm. So there you go. See, she's got it. Abracadabra. I will create as spoken. In other words, what power our words have. I will create as spoken. So you thought it was just a bunch of magicians mumbo jumbo, but it isn't. It's really something we can use. So, are you ready to create as spoken? Sure. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
No magic paper is needed today, just your imagination and the desire to release that which no longer serves you and be open to creating with your spoken word. which is so powerful. So now that we've taken care of that, we're going to build on that work with our topic for today, which is principle is not bound by precedent. The sentence principle is not bound by precedent was originally spoken by who? Not Ernest Holmes, but one of his persons that he studied greatly and had great admiration for, Thomas Troward, and is recorded in the book The Edinburgh Lectures, which is, as the name says, a compilation of the lectures he gave in Edinburgh. Imagine that. So, we're on the same page. We're on the same page. What is principle here? In The Science of Mind, Holmes writes, principle is the power that made everything. Principle is the power that made everything. It is absolute. It will not and cannot be denied. So principle is not bound by precedent means that God is not limited by what has occurred before. Okay, now isn't that interesting? Because what was that? And I think it was proven that it wasn't true, but somebody said that at the turn of the century into the 1900s, they said everything that's ever been invented has already been invented. There's nothing new. And that goes in direct conflict with this. Yeah. And they said, no, that never was really said. But I'm sure somebody probably thought that. And that's not true because God is creating all of the time. Look how far we've come. Wow, if we stop then, what a boring world, right? Likewise, we are not limited to what has gone before, as we explored in very much depth last Sunday. However, we must, to quote Holmes in The Living of the Science of Mind, create new avenues in our minds for a fresh approach and a new outlook to the spirit. This is something that each of us must do for ourselves, but there must be a method or a way to begin. And then he gives us 4 steps. I love this about Holmes. He gives us a roadmap. This is awesome. 4 ways of being that really will help us live the truth that principle is not bound by precedent. And these 4 ways of being take all we've worked with this month and they put them into 4 steps. 4 beautiful, powerful steps. So let's see what they are. Number 1, realize what we are dealing with. In Living the Science of Mind, we find these empowering words. We should start with the firm conviction that we are dealing with a power which is not bound. It is not limited. It is not only some power, it is all power. Christian Larson writes in The Pathway of Roses, the universe is orderly from the center to circumference, and everything is established upon the firm foundation of eternal right and universal good. There is a power that lives and moves throughout this vast immensity, and all those things that have a permanent place in the cosmos or that are instrumental in any way in promoting the purpose of life have their source in this one power. All the laws and forces in existence spring originally from this power. It is therefore the center and source of all that lives and moves, and this power is the power of God. Wayne Dyer relates how he went from being an agnostic who seriously questioned the very existence of God, to an absolute believer in the divine intelligence behind all things. So this was the example that cleared it all up for him. Imagine, if you will, a junkyard filled with millions of pieces of random junk. Wires strewn about, bits of metal, tires, fabric, foam, electrical machinery, screws, nuts and bolts, glass, fragments of porcelain, and everything else that you can imagine, just lying around haphazardly.
That's our bedroom.
Yes, it is. Suddenly, a gigantic wind blows through this messy junkyard, and the pieces of junk are all thrown up into the air, colliding with each other, flying and crashing here and there. And just as suddenly, the force of the wind subsides, and there in the junkyard, where millions of pieces of trash had previously been, is a jumbo jet, a Boeing 747 all ready to fly. By happenstance, luck, a weird coincidence, all the junk were pieced together to make a perfect jet aircraft out of several million pieces of debris. From random rubbish to precise perfection by accident. I don't think so. Dyers writes, in his book, there's a spiritual solution to every problem. There's an intelligent system that we are all a part of. There is a force, a power, a consciousness that created and supports this system. That force is omnipresent, and therefore it is in you. Your body is a part of this system and is also a system of perfectly coordinated parts itself. While it may appear random and unintelligent, it is the height of arrogance to assume it is accidental. It is just as unlikely for the wind to accidentally blow together several million pieces of debris and create a 747 jumbo jet as it is for a force to accidentally arrange this intelligent system that we are all a part of, which has billions of moving parts. That simple little story opened me to knowing that there is an intelligence created by many names, or called by many names, but essentially comprised of cooperation, harmony, peace, flow, or love, that is the source of all. There is a power, there is all the power behind all that is. Holmes says that this is our first step in having the truth statement, principle is not bound by precedent, become a living reality in our lives. So number 2, realize that we have access to this power. It's not reserved for just a chosen few. In Living the Science of Mind, Holmes says, next we must assure ourselves that we have access to this power. We could never do this if we felt that the power were external to us, if it were somewhere out there, if it were something apart from or different from our very own being. We discover that God is immediate and personal and a possibility latent within the self, but ready to be called upon and used. Number 3, not only realize that we have access to it, but we have to identify with it. Again, Holmes writes, our next step is to identify the self with this power. I am that which thou art that which I am. We are one with this power, in it, with it, and some part of it. In 1893, Swami Vivekananda, a Hindu master, arrived in Chicago to speak at the very first World Parliament of Religions. 1893. Wow. He was the first Hindu to ever address the American public, and what he said was shocking to many. In fact, he was regarded by many as a heinous blasphemer because of his message. So what did he say? Anybody remember what he said? Well, he told the story of a lion who had been raised by a flock of sheep and naturally thought that he was one of them. Another lion tried to convince him that he was not a sheep at all, but to no avail, until he took the sheep lion to the pool and showed him his true reflection. Vivekananda then told the audience, and you, my friends, are all lions. You are pure, infinite, and perfect souls. He for whom you have been weeping and praying in your churches and temples is your own self. Wow, imagine hearing that in 1893. So remember the affirmation we used a couple of weeks ago. The power within me is the power of God, and this power is my divine authority to create. So let's say that again to really anchor us in step number 3. The power within me is the power of God. Within me is the power of God, and this power is my divine authority. To create. All right. So step number 4. After we access and identify with it, we must consciously increase our expectation and deepen our realization by using it. It's great to keep it all up here, right? It's like, I know this stuff, I know this stuff, I know this. Why is my life falling apart? No, we can't just know it. We actually have to use it. It doesn't do us any good to have the combination to a combination lock if we never use the combination to get into it, right?
Right.
The temporary Sunday school teacher was struggling to open the combination lock of a supply cabinet. She'd been told the combination, but she couldn't remember it. Remember those days in junior high school or high school in your locker? Wait. So she went to the pastor's study to ask for help, and the pastor came into the room and began to turn the dial. After the first 2 numbers, he paused and he stared blankly for a moment. Finally, he looked serenely heavenward, and his lips moved silently. He was looking up. Right. Then he looked back at the lock, and he quickly turned the final numbers, and he opened the lock. The teacher was amazed, and she said, I stand in awe of the power of prayer, Pastor. As do I, he answered, but this time the numbers are on a piece of tape on the ceiling. There we go. So here again is the method Holmes lays out for us to live from a place of knowing and experiencing that principle is not bound by precedent. let's review our 4 statements for this morning. So we have realize what you are dealing with, the all power. Realize that you have access to this power. It's not reserved for a chosen few. Not only realize you have access to it, but identify with it. And after we access and identify it, consciously increase our expectation and deepen our realization of it by meditation, communing with the divine and using it. So I want you to think for just a moment now, how is it that you could use this combination in your life today? How could you use this combination, what's spelled out here, in your life today? I really always want to make what we do very practical and useful in your life. So are we willing to do that? Do we want to do that? Make
Yes.
this an activity? Okay, so we're going to take a few moments right now to think about a current situation in your life and then apply each step to it. Let's just all apply each step. Let's realize what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the all power. That we have access to this power. It's ours to use. And identify. We not only have access to it, but we can identify with it. We know that it is who we are. And then consciously increase our expectation and deepen our realization by meditation. Commune with the divine and use it. Does anybody have any examples that they want to apply this to right now? Anything in their own lives that they could see that where this would be a good tool to use? If you're willing to share.
Well, Marissa and I have written 3 young adult books,
Mm-hmm.
and we're working on a 4th book. And I believe they're really quite good. And with the avenues available now to publish these, we've talked about it recently. We were able to travel together this week and talk about this. So I think we're both charged to complete the 4th book and then.
Okay, so you
Sure,
can
they
use
can
these 4
publish.
steps to bring you in alignment with that.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Anybody else have something that they're going to apply this to?
My home remodeling?
Your home remodeling.
Um,
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I have some projects that I'd like to get in alignment and see happen, and some other things that we'd like to see take place. And so these are great tools to use. Absolutely wonderful tools. So I invite you to remember what these are. This talk will be recorded, so you're welcome to listen to it again and use these to create a more peaceful, fulfilled, happy experience than you have ever experienced before. It's a good tool to keep with us.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is.